Hello everybody, I'm going to show you how to paint a roundish object and make it look three-dimensional. We're going to use lemons today, as you can see from my examples down here. I like roundish fruit, because they're kind of blobby, and no one's going to criticize it for being a little awkward looking. It's just a round blob. What's the big deal? So that's what we're going to do. And you can see I've got some examples that I've done previously. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to practice coloring in a shaped solid, kind of like what I did over here. And if you were going to do a very, very large object, you really need to be careful that you work quickly before your shape dries. So this is my lemon here. So a small object like this is going to take a while to dry, so you don't have to worry quite as much, but if you're going to work large, it would be more of a problem. Here it is. Make sure you can see everything. So you draw it, and then you figure out what color you want to use. I'm going with this yellow here, and I started off by putting a bunch of water into the palette. I'll just mix a little bit more here. Then I take the color I've chosen from my palette, stir it around really well, and here we go. Now you can see what I'm doing. And just mix it in vigorously. Make sure all that paint is off the brush and in your palette. Before I start putting it on my paper, I want to test it out, see, is it the color I want? That's pretty good. I'm going to go with that. So I've got enough there to do several lemons. So I'm just going to color it in. I'm not going to worry about a highlight for this first one. Just going to color it in, starting at one end. Often I'll start at the left because I'm right-handed, and then I'll move to the right. If you're right-handed, you might want to color in the right side first and then move to the left. It's all about making sure that my fingers don't accidentally touch the lemon. You can imagine if I did a really big object, that would be trickier. But this is small, this is easier. So yeah, just working quickly, and then not messing with it any more than I absolutely have to. If I did get this really wet by accident, if I got it too wet like that, if I could see like a shiny puddle on there, I can take my brush, I'm rinsing out my brush, I can dry it on a paper towel or rag, and I can soak up that excess. And if it's a good cotton paper, it should just even out pretty easily. So that's my first lemon. Very easy, very fast. You don't need to mess with it too much. If you mess with it too long, then it might get splotchy, but just watercolor's alive and it tends to move on its own. So for the second lemon, we're gonna do kind of like this here. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. But we're going to create a highlight on it. You can use just any pencil. This is like a regular old, very beat up #2 pencil. You could use a pen, whatever you want, just so long as the pen is waterproof. And I can either color in the white clear first, or I can start with the yellow first. I'm going to start with the clear water first. So I'm making like a circle here. And I'm avoiding the edges. I'm kind of keeping it towards the top of my lemon. And now I'm going to paint the yellow around that highlight, that white clear highlight. And it'll look like the light is hitting the top of the lemon, kind of the middle top of the lemon. And I'm going all the way around it, and I want to touch the area that I painted with the clear water. So that's going to be soft. That's going to be wet into wet technique. If I want to add some more yellow to it, I can. I can put a little bit more down here. I can make that area smaller if I want. If I think I've made it too small, I can also rinse out my brush. Rinsing out my brush, I'm drying it off on a cloth, and I can actually absorb some of that yellow if I think I've done too much. I can also add some just plain clear water as well, but I want to be really tentative. It's easy to add. It's like we're just fussing, gently fussing, but you don't want to go too long. It's easy to get into perfectionist zone. This is fine. I'm leaving it alone. No more. Now, so we've got a highlight, we've got a solid. How about a shadow? How do we put a shadow on there? Well, there's two different approaches you can do. The first one is you can take a dry area like one of these guys. These are still wet, but these I dried with a hairdryer, and I can add a shadow after I've painted in that yellow local color. Local color is what they mean. What I mean by that, the physical color of the object versus the color of the shadow or any light that's bouncing around. So often I like to make shadows a cool color. It could be a blue, it could be a bluish black. What do I mean by bluish black? Well, there's a color called Payne's Gray. There's a color called indigo. Here's like a nice kind of pale grayish color that would make a good shadow. Another good color that would make a shadow would be like an ultramarine blue. Just stick some in, mixing in my palette just a little bit of these two colors here, so you can see what I'm doing. So if it was a sunny day and the sky was reflecting its color everywhere, you might get some blue in your shadow. So that would also make a good color for your shadow. If you don't have these colors, you can try whatever you have in your palette. You can often use the mud in your palette. If you've got a bunch of colors in there, mix them together, add a little extra blue, and you might get a color very similar to this sort of indigo color, this or Payne's Gray. You can actually mix this color if you want to. From whatever, if you have a red, yellow, and blue, we can get something close. So we're keeping it simple though. I'm just going to stick with what I have here. So how do I make this shadow? How do I make this shadow? I'm going to get the paper wet, getting it wet, and I'm getting it wet in a much larger area than I want my shadow to be. We're adding a second layer on top of this yellow. So we're doing glazing. We're kind of doing wet and glazing at the same time. I'm dipping my brush in to this sort of Payne's Gray indigo color. It's kind of pale. I want it to be on the pale side. And I'm just putting a bunch of dots down here. And you notice I'm not all the way to the bottom. I'm close to the bottom. I'm close to the bottom, but I still have a little yellow there. That makes it look like this object is round and that it's sitting on a light surface, and there's a highlight just almost at the bottom. So I'm saving that highlight, and I cleaned my brush, I dried it off a little bit, and now I can kind of smooth out that shadow so it looks natural. It's a very subtle shadow. It's not a deep shadow. It's just very subtle, and it looks round. It now looks three-dimensional. If I want to put a shadow underneath an object, I can go ahead. I'm going to do, let's see, maybe I'll do this one right here because this is totally dry. I can take that same shadow color and I can just paint it underneath. Once again, we're looking at a lot of like rounded sort of smiley curved shapes. We're not going flat. We think about it's on a flat table, but it's a round object and that shadow is going to curve around it. So now I'm putting water. I painted the gray first, and now I'm softening the edges of that gray with some water. Got a little bit of white in there. I can just kind of fix that by moving the gray up there. So we're just making everything really soft around that edge. So there we go. We've got a little bit of a shadow underneath that round lemon. There's one more way. I've been breaking it down into little pieces. There's one more way to do this so that you can get this effect in just one step, where I'm going to do the highlight, the color yellow, and the shadow all in one step. I'm not going to do the shadow on the table in this step. I think I really need to let it dry to have it really work out. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. So here we go. This is my last lemon, the last one that will fit on my page. My last wonky looking lemon. There he is. Okay. I still have lots of yellow left. It's a good idea to, like, if I clean out my brush, I want to dry it off so that I'm not accidentally adding a bunch of water to my color that I mixed. I stir it around a little bit just in case that pigment has settled to the bottom of that area. And now I'm actually reversing. I'm doing the yellow first, and then I'll add the water second. Either way works. The point is we're doing wet into wet technique. Everywhere inside this lemon is wet. I'm doing everything while it's wet. Rinsing out my brush, and I'm taking that wet, clean brush, and I'm coloring in that little area with clear water, and I'm just softening the edges. And I can kind of coax it around a little bit if I need to, but not too much, just a little bit. Now, I do not wait. I don't have a conversation with anyone. I don't do anything else. I just rinse out my brush, I dry my brush, and then I dip it straight into that shadow color I made. So now I can go ahead and do that shadow. Rinsed out my brush, I'm drying my brush, and then if it's too much, I can lift it up. If it's too much, I can lift it up. I can kind of push it around very, very gently. Rinse out my brush. I think I want to put a little more yellow in there. If I want, I can bring some yellow back in. Let's push that shadow down. So I can kind of move things where I want them to be. But it's a limited window, and it's easy to get too fussy and picky and try and make things perfect. I try and stop as soon as I can stand it. So yeah, there it is. I have done all the lemons, all the techniques. I hope you will try this at home, and you will try this with lemons or with whatever roundish objects, fruit, whatever you happen to have. Play around, try this again. Okay, I'll see you in class. Bye-bye.